Welcome, everybody. We will be starting in 1 minute. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat if you'd like to say where you are tuning in from today, which communities. It's great to see the diversity of attendance and where you're coming from. Wonderful. Well, welcome everyone again. This is our third of our webinar series. The focus today is on transportation. And we have with us 3 RDCK staff who will be speaking about transportation. Alex Lefflar, who's the Climate Action Assistant, Sherry Amada, who is our Senior Energy Specialist, and Tom Dool, who's a Research Analyst. And I'll be passing over the slides to them in a moment, just to take you through a bit of an introduction for a few minutes. Oops. First, I wanted to, for those that are new and haven't yet joined us on the webinar, I'd like to review our revised engagement process. We sent out a media release a week ago, last Thursday, showing the revised engagement process for the next few months. And then a little bit of housekeeping, talking about the pathways and new and existing, providing some clarification there, and then we'll move it into our presentations. So as mentioned, we have a revised engagement process, a combination of both online and in-person events. All of this information can be found on our website, rdck.ca/climate action, and specifically our new tab, Get Involved, where you'll find information and registration links for the webinars. We have 3 more webinars happening after today. Also, tomorrow we're launching our engagement site at engage.rdck.ca, and there'll be ongoing information and opportunity to provide some feedback via survey and ongoing updates about different events. In August, we'll be hosting dialogue circles, which will be in person, and those will be a lead into our open houses, which will begin at the end of August and go through October in all electoral areas and municipalities. And lastly, also in person will be subject meetings focused on some of the key climate action areas, including transportation, land use, food and agriculture, and water, and more details to come on those. For today, a reminder that we have 10 pathways in as part of the action work that we're focused on. Today, we're focused on transportation and mobility. There are 95 actions included in the Climate Action Plan. There are 60 that are included in existing work plans. That means that they've already been approved by the RDCK, whether through the budgetary process or through a regulatory process, and they're part of our ongoing work and service to you as residents. And then there are 35 new actions that are proposed, and those are the actions that largely focus on designing and figuring out solutions that are relevant for our rural communities. For today's webinar on transportation, we will have presentations and then we'll have questions. Please use the Q&A function that's at the bottom of your screen for the questions, and we'll be either answering them in written form. Alex is responding to a lot of questions, and then questions can also be responded to by the presenters after their presentations. We won't have a chance likely to respond to all questions, but we are responding to questions by email as well, so feel free to follow up with us by email. Great, and we will now turn it over to our presenters. And Tom Dool is going to be starting us off talking about BC Transit. Over to you, Tom.
Thanks, Paris. I really appreciate it. I hope the sound levels are good for everybody out there. My name is Tom Dool. I'm a research analyst for the Regional District of Central Kootenay. which is shorthand for guy who does things. One of the many things I do for the regional district is I actually steward 2 different public transportation systems, which include West Kootenay Transit and Creston Valley Transit. So 2 very different systems. Today, I'm going to give you the lowdown on how public transit works. Then we're going to talk about why it's important, particularly in the context of the regional district of Central Kootenay. And then I'm going to get into the details of what's coming for public transit in the Creston Valley and for West Kootenay Transit. So without much further ado, I'm going to try and share my screen right now. One of my colleagues will tell me if it's not sharing properly, I hope. Here we go. How's that, Paris? Is that looking good?
No, it's not coming up yet.
Okay. Share screen. Share. There we go.
There you go. Yeah, that's excellent.
Right.
And we.
Okay, there we go. I've already given you my introduction and stuff, but this is my presentation, how public transit works and why it matters, particularly in the context of the regional district of Central Kootenay. I'm going to start with an overview model. This is really the 10,000 foot level. Okay, so BC Transit partnership model, and this is how we provide transit services. And when I say transit services, I mean the bus, right? In the regional district of Central Kootenay, there is a transportation ecosystem. The bus is a part of that ecosystem. And that part that I take care of involves partnerships. And those partnerships are basically involving the provincial government, which sets public policy objectives. Then we work with BC Transit, who's really on the operations side of things. They contract operators for us. They provide planning support. They provide financial support and many other things. And then over in the 58 different local governments corner, the regional districts of Central Kootenay is one of those governments. And again, we provide 2 different BC Transit transit systems here in this area. I can't stress enough the importance of the idea of partnership. This is, and I'm going to get further into this in other slides, but this doesn't work unless we are all working together. These are the primary partners, our operators such as Next Gen Transit or the City of Nelson. There are other operators in other parts of the province. There's, of course, the Regional District of Central Kootenay, and then there's BC Transit, but there's also the Ministry of Transportation, the Interior Health Authority, and a number of other agencies that are on the periphery providing funding or different support to the work that we're doing in public transit. Roles and responsibilities. So according to the Transit Act, we each have different roles and responsibilities in the provision of public transit, okay? And if you have a look at these lists, you can see it's very different, but what we're really trying to do is we're trying to stick in the lane that we're good at. Because local government is probably closest to the constituent or the ridership in a given area, what we really want to focus on is service levels, right? Because we're a very responsive level of government. If you're unhappy with the way transit is functioning in the area, you can always reach out to your local elected official or local government staff, and we're generally readily available. Whereas BC Transit, on the other hand, is a much larger organization. And so they're really involved in procurement. We've got about 1,600 buses provincially that are sprinkled over 58 different systems. If we as local government were to try and buy those buses ourselves, there's no way we could leverage the kind of costing that BC Transit is able to get because they're one of the biggest bus buyers in North America. Then we've got our local operating companies, such as the City of Nelson, who we contract to provide services for part of West Kootenay Transit, and Next Gen Transit, who is providing it for other portions of the regional district of Central Kootenay. Now, their expertise is in driving the buses, in servicing the buses, and in maintaining the infrastructure to ensure that rolling stock keeps going 24/7 year-round. The shared services model. Transit's entirely unique. I don't know of any other service really that the provincial government is willing to provide roughly half of your operations funding. And so when I say that, what I'm saying is for every dollar that local government is able to put into public transit, the provincial government will pretty much match those dollars. Now there's 2 different funding models. One is conventional transit. Conventional transit in the regional district of Central Kootenay involves the paratransit system and conventional scheduled transit. Okay, so there's a spectrum of transit services, but in general, that's the bus that's scheduled to stop at a stop, come by and pick you up. That's our 9998 services that run from city of Nelson through the city of Castlegar, through the city of Trail, up the Slocan Valley. It's routes 1 through 4 in the Creston Valley. We also have custom transit, which it said below is a handy dart service. So this is sort of on-demand transit. These are the services with that, if you have mobility challenges, or in some cases, it's just the baseline service that we provide, where you pick up the phone, you call, and a bus comes and picks you up and takes you to the location that you need to get to. The provincial government will not pay half your water costs. They will not pay half your fire costs. They will not pay half your garbage costs, but they will pay half your transit costs. I think that's a really important thing to highlight for you right now, because it just gives you an idea about how important mobility is to the provincial government and how critical it is that we provide these services in our communities. I can't stress this enough, because it really shows how, people right across the spectrum understand that public transit is actually a greater good in so many ways. If we want to talk about aging in place, if we want to talk about good health outcomes, if we want to talk about good education outcomes, if we want to talk about access to social services, if we want to talk about food security, all of this can be and is tied into public transit. And that's why we see significant investments in public transit by our provincial and federal governments. Let's talk about why transit is important, okay? If you look at our communities in the context of the regional district of Central Kootenay, have a look at the numbers here. These are travel times, okay? If you look at the kinds of trips that people do, for example, in the city of Castlegar and Nelson, 54% of those trips are under 15 minutes, okay? And what that basically means is those are probably walkable trips. In those communities, you can probably 54% of the time, you could probably walk to the destinations that you need to get to. Now, that means, of course, that sort of 46% of the time in those communities, you're probably going to get in a vehicle or use some other mode of transportation to get where you want to go. And odds are that transportation is going to be a single occupancy vehicle. That's the probability. Now, in our larger centers, you'll note that 54% of the time you're within a walkable area. In the towns and villages, our smaller centers, right? That number goes down just a little bit, but the numbers are basically comparable until you look at the other side of the scale there in the 15 to 29, 30 to 34, 40 to 45, right? It becomes harder and harder to get to those services. You can either walk to the things you need in the village, but there's a lot of services there that you're actually going to have to leave the village to go get. When you get into the designated places in the rural areas, this highlights the reliance on vehicles by people living in our rural areas. Now, having said that, think of that in the context of the provision of services. Where are the hospitals? Where are the grocery stores? Where are the education centers? Where are the social services? Where's employment? Where's all these pieces? Well, they're in the urban areas. So if you're in a designated place like Weimar or Hull Siding or Winlaw, or if you're living in a rural area, even outside of those, you're gonna need a car to get to those places the vast majority of the time, okay? Or if we provide a safe, reliable public transit service, this becomes a viable alternative very, very quickly. And we'll highlight some numbers with showing that later on in the presentation. Mode share by community. Okay, so mode share is sort of how you get around, all right? Now we highlight two different mode shares. That's not 100% of mode share. We're talking about single occupancy vehicle, or we're talking about public transit. These numbers look abysmal. I know, we've got a lot of room for growth here. But the fact of the matter is, you know what? Castlegar actually has a mode. Castlegar on its own actually has a very high transit mode share. I think it's about 3.2%, which is well above the provincial norm. City of Nelson is approximately at the provincial norm, but City of Nelson also has a very high cycling mode share, I think about 9%. But you'll note again, when I was talking about the need to get to different places, to get to services, the need to access these things in the urban areas, such as Nelson and Castlegar, you don't actually need to use the car or the bus nearly as often, right? And the frequency of single occupancy vehicles is relatively low. When we get into our designated places and our rural electoral areas, one, you see higher transit usage because it is a viable alternative in those areas. And two, you see a lot more vehicle usage because getting to services is just that much more challenging. The distances are that much greater. So again, there's a lot of room when I look at these numbers to shift people from the single occupancy vehicle to the transit mode share, to move people onto buses. We're seeing it more and more. I'm going to highlight some numbers for you a little further on in the presentation that shows the growth of transit and how I think we can continue that growth. Sorry. Let's talk about West Kootenay Transit for a second. West Kootenay Transit is a very unique system. This is a sort of infographic of what the system looks like. West Kootenay Transit is an entirely unique proposition. We provide transit services to about 75,000 people spread over 22,000 square kilometers. That's about an area, that's an area about the size of Belgium. Okay, we're providing services to 13 municipalities and 14 rural electoral areas within the regional district of Central Kootenay and the regional district of Kootenay boundary. So we actually span 2 regional districts. The West Kootenay Transit System is actually a partnership between the Regional District of Central Kootenay and the Regional District of Kootenay Boundary and the City of Nelson, okay? But again, on the periphery of that partnership is also BC Transit, the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, the Interior Health Authority, and a few other public agencies that help to ensure this funding, funding for what amounts to a very large transit system in a very rural area. BC Transit has been looking at this model consistently for the last couple of years because, again, it's an entirely unique proposition. We don't see public transit in rural areas like this. It's a very exciting idea. The people who live in the Kootenays, whether it's the RDCK or the RDKB, have a very, very strong connection to their public transit systems. There's a 100-year-long history here of traveling either by sternwheeler or rail to get from community to community. People have done this for a long time, and there's an expectation out there that they will continue to do so in the future. So in that regard, West Kootenay Transit is actually part of a long-standing tradition of intercommunity travel here, okay? Now, when Greyhound disappeared, yes, it affected our ability to get out of this region, but it was no more than a blip in terms of our ability to travel around within this region. You know, I always tell people there is no other public transit system that I know of that will get you to 2 different hot springs and a ski hill all in one day for $2.50. I can't say enough good things about West Kootenay Transit. Let's take a look at the West Kootenay Transit ridership numbers, okay? So starting in 2013, when the system was initiated, the system actually was initiated through the amalgamation of 9 different public transit systems, okay? We started off with roughly about 600,000 riders, 600,000 rides per year. By 2019, just pre-COVID, we were at close to 1 million rides per year. This is not small transit. We're pushing transit on a scale comparable with large transit systems on Vancouver Island, in the Okanagan, and in the Lower Mainland. So this is not small transit. The fact that we're seeing that kind of ridership with a population of only 75,000 people is something that consistently gets brought up with me by the executive at BC Transit and by officials in the provincial government. And then 2021 happened, COVID. COVID cut our numbers about in half for a variety of reasons. One of those reasons being, of course, that the international students were not coming. People were not commuting to work as often. Schools closed down. So we saw pretty much a closure of the education commute, a lot of shifts. But one thing I want you to note is that despite the fact that it did cut our ridership in half, public transit was still there all the way through the pandemic. Public transit did not shut down. It was deemed a critical service, okay? And again, once again, that just really highlights the commitment on the part of local government and the provincial government to ensure that people in this region have mobility as a human right. Now in the recovery to COVID, from the sort of COVID dip that we've seen, we're seeing a pretty steady increase. What I anticipate is that we will be back to 2019 numbers by about 2025, which leaves us in a really interesting situation because I want you to look at that gray line that goes across the screen. The gray line that you see there is our investment in annual operating hours. So that's our ability to provide services. So despite the fact that we saw a 63% increase in ridership, we saw a 3% increase in investment in transit services, or in 3% increase in annual operating hours. Our costs did go up because annual costs just do go up. Gas costs more, diesel costs more, buses cost more. But our investment in hours, the ability to provide services, did not increase. So by 2019, we were at critical numbers. I don't know if any of you remember what transit services were like then. I still have nightmares about it. Our buses were absolutely packed. We were leaving people behind. It was a real challenge. In response to that, we developed the Transit Future Service Plan for West Kootenay Transit. So that is the Kootenay Lake West, Castlegar and area, City of Nelson component in 2021 was developed. And this was a response to the demand for transit in the system. Its sister document, the Greater Trail Transit Service Review, which was done in 2016, sort of ties these two systems together, okay? Now, this plan made 32 different recommendations. Those recommendations were prioritized from critical services, short-term fixes, midterm, and then long-term, okay? So right now, we're actually in the process of addressing the critical fixes and the short-term fixes that need to happen to ensure by 2025, we're actually well aligned with the degree of ridership that we anticipate, which are those 2019 levels. We've talked with Selkirk College, these students are coming back. We can see the the employment commute starting to pick up again. We're watching those numbers come back. Certainly the high school commute is already all the way back. The ridership is reemerging. Now, the Greater Trail Transit Service Review was done by our partners down at RDCK. This is an integrated system, so our two halves of the system have to work in complete tandem. This is a network. We share service providers, we share rolling stock, and our ridership expects to be able to move through this entire 22,000 square kilometer area in a very seamless fashion. So you can see here, these were their priorities, sort of in the southern half of the system. Kootenay Lake West, Castlegar and area, this is our side of the plan, what I'm going to refer to probably from now on as the TFSP, the Transit's Future Service Plan. Okay, a little bit about the TFSP. We took a serious dive into public engagement. We probably talked to about 1,600 people, whole shot. We held a number of targeted stakeholder workshops. There were open house events, there were online surveys, there was campus engagement. Again, we think we heard loud and clear from the ridership about what they are looking for in the system. And we think we came up with a number of solutions we feel are going to be able to address that. Let's talk about what's coming for West Kootenay Transit and how we're getting ready for a return to those 2019 numbers. Service priorities, these are our critical fixes. So the number 99, that 99 connector, which runs from the City of Nelson down to Castlegar and meets the 98 connector, which can get you to the City of Trail and particularly the Trail Hospital. We're going to put 2 more of those buses on the road. That'll involve the procurement of 2 new large capacity vehicles. So that's going to be a big step forward for us, because that 99-98 corridor, that really forms the backbone of the whole system. As we strengthen that backbone, it then gives us the ability to reach out into sort of arterial areas like Salmo, Slocan Valley, the number 10 going out the North Shore and up the lake to Caslow, and sets the stage for providing improvements to those services as well. You'll note the next line item is an extension of the number 10 all the way out to Balfour. So we're not going to stop at 6 Mile anymore. We're going to try and reach all the way out there for our evening commute. We'll be getting 2 more 98s to tie into the 99. Selkirk College, we've heard loud and clear from the students that they want better access to the City of Castlegar. So we're reaching into the City of Castlegar on that 33. We're going to provide a bunch more shuttle runs back and forth. And then, of course, in the City of Nelson, we're hoping to see an additional Fairview bus. Short-term fixes, there are a number of short-term fixes. I don't need to go through all of them for you, but there's something in this for everyone. But you'll note that these fixes are really addressing what I, again, refer to as those sort of arterial areas off that backbone and then out a little further. How do we get people in from the rural and semi-rural areas onto that backbone system and then into those major centers for the services, for groceries, for education, for employment, and then get them back on buses and then back out into those areas? At the core of this, really, like, there are two different groups that we're really trying to address with services like this. There are the people without vehicles, right? But then there are the people with a vehicle and trying to save those people from having to get a second vehicle. Second vehicle, on average, going to cost you about $8,500 a year. Bus pass for a kid under the age of 12 is free. For an adult, I think we're looking somewhere in the neighborhood of about $400 a year to buy a bus pass for the year round. So it's a considerable savings right now, outside of even just reducing, getting fewer cars on the road. How are we going to do this? Like, how does this work? A lot of people come to me and say, like, oh, we should put a bus here. Push a button and a new route pops out, or there should be additional buses over here or there. And one of the things I often have to explain to people is how long it takes to actually implement service level changes. On average, it takes between a year and a year and a half. And that's not because people are dragging their feet. That's because we have partnerships and matched funding and these relationships that we need to work through in order to make these changes. So at the start of winter 2023, we review priorities from the TFSP. Okay, everything that we're going to do in regards to changes to the system is captured in the TFSP because the TFSP was driven by the ridership. We heard loud and clear from the ridership that this is what they need. By the way, it's a living document. We're constantly doing consultation on a smaller scale of the community. We'll be in Salmo sometime in the very near future, then hopefully out in the valley, then up at the north end of the lake, constantly trying to bring new information into plan through partnerships with Selkirk College, a couple different transportation institutes, and BC Transit. Regardless, we're going to review the priorities within the plan, okay? Then the transit improvement process starts in April, okay? So we have a series of proposals on the deck right now that we're talking about with BC Transit. By September, those proposals will be finalized in that local government will have committed funding to those processes and BC Transit will have committed funding to those processes or not. Remember, there are 55 different systems, public transportation systems out there. We are competing with them for funding and improvements to the system. Those services are funded through the provincial transit operating grant. Oftentimes that grant can be oversubscribed. But if we do get the money, and if we are prioritized in that system, BC Transit service plan is then submitted for provincial approval. It goes into the provincial budget. Buses are then procured. Planners are then engaged. Blockers to look at how the transit system works and stuff. Remember, this is an integrated network. So if you move any one piece of it, it affects everything else. So we look at the whole picture. And then we basically are ready to start doing a new implementation. If that implementation does not involve new rolling stock or a new bus, we'll be able to start that very early in the year, probably January. If that implementation involves buying new rolling stock, as many of our proposals do, we're talking about growing the system, we'll more likely see an implementation mid-summer of the next fiscal year. So between a year and a year and a half. So if you've got a great transit idea, bring that transit idea forward, but bring it forward with the expectation that it is going to take time to get things done.
Thanks, Tom. I just want to let you know you're almost at time.
Okay, I will move this thing right along here. So I want to talk really quickly about what's on the deck right now in the transportation proposals for the next 3 years. Okay, so we have additional on the 99, 98 corridor. I talked about those previously. I'd like you to have a look at the numbers on the right-hand side of the screen and what that represents for an investment in the part of local government. Okay, so we have some smaller rural trips here going on in the Edgewood area, Slocan Valley. Additional service out to Salmo, we'd like to turn that into a 5 days a week, consistent education and employment commute from a 3-day-a-week trip. We'd like to try and tie Salmo into trail through the Fruitvale route. That's been desired for quite some time. We're going to extend service to Castlegar from Nelson to 8 p.m. in the evening so those students can stay late and study and people can actually catch an employment commute home. We'd like to actually see some heavier buses. We're going to change that 99 98. I have dreams of double-decker buses on that route. I think it will be fantastic. Really quickly, Creston Valley Transit System. We're going to leave the West Kootenay Transit System. We're going to go over to one of the smallest transit systems in the province right now. The interesting thing about the Creston Valley Transit System is that it is nearly 60% on-demand transit. The Creston Valley has a very large seniors population and they have made it loud and clear what they want to see, and we have been able to respond to it. Again, it's a very small system, only 6,000 operating hours. But if you look at who's there and you look at the degree of engagement that they've managed to pull off, it is absolutely phenomenal. We recently did a transit future service plan with them. They've been loud and clear. They want to see more custom transit. So we will probably push that number up to 70% custom transit in a small rural area, which is phenomenal. And we will look at trying to extend services. Here's a list of the services coming and what's in the current operating proposal. Please note, we're trying to extend services up the east shore of Kootenay Lake, and that's because a very active transit community there really wants to see those services coming. So that is under consideration, likely in 2025, 26 right now. Whew, around the world in 30 days. I covered a lot of information very quickly. I'm entirely available for questions. If your question does not get answered in this webinar, feel free to get a hold of me through my contact information, which was on the opening slide.
Amazing, Tom.
Okay, Paris.
Yeah, thank you very much. You did cover an incredible amount of information. And fortunately, this is also recorded, so people can also view the recording again and catch anything that they missed. We do have some great questions, and we have about 5 minutes for questions, and then we'll move to our next presentation. One question that we had from Corinne Maury is clarifying the amount that we have in our vehicle expenditure, which for 2022 was 2.2 million, and how that's actually, what does that include in terms of expenses? And I realize this isn't necessarily a BC Transit question, but I know that you are also involved in managing our RDCK fleet. Could you explain a little bit about what that vehicle expenditure is?
Oh man, okay, so that's the vehicle reserve essentially. And so you have to remember that the RDCK has about 160 different vehicles. That includes everything from heavy machinery operating in our landfill sites to Toyota Priuses occupying, being operated in our administrative fleet. Okay, those vehicles constantly require consistent maintenance. When you do that, when you look at that number of about 160 different vehicles, $8,500 a year each, you get up to a number in the millions pretty quick. We also consistently have to retire those vehicles and replace them with updated vehicles. The transition to electric will involve an entire changeover in how we work with vehicles too. So we're investing in electric infrastructure, we're getting ready to do some work on that over at 202 Lakeside Drive right now and other locations. That also covers some of those costs are also associated with looking at sort of best fit, like what should our fleets look like 20 years from now? We cannot continue, we don't just continue to procure what we procured last time, right? If you want to make the transition to electric, you need to put a lot of thought into these things. And while we're very good at operations, sometimes we do engage consultants to give us the best possible scenario in the future moving forward. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you so much, Tom. That's excellent. And just a note to people who are asking questions, we are answering questions. So if you're putting a statement in, please be sure to, and you want a question answered, please include a question in there. And we're also including, we're working to have a diversity of questions answered or asked. So I will be going now to, well, I think Nancy Hawksby, here you've asked, what is the estimated numbers for 2023? I think that was asked during the ridership numbers. And maybe an additional question could be, are you seeing an increase and a recovery to pre-COVID numbers, or are we holding steady? What is the trend, Tom?
The trend is up fast. That's what we're experiencing right now. You've probably seen this in the headlines. A lot of employers who were like 100% committed to working at home are no longer 100% committed to working at home. They want people coming back into these office spaces that they are paying for still. And there's a realization that not all work can be done from remote locations for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's personal choice, sometimes it's otherwise. Certainly education, right? So we're going to see 700 to 800 international students at Selkirk College again by 2025. Now, in an average population, you would anticipate about 3% of the 2-3% of the population would be public transit users. Of that community coming over, those international students, 100% of them are transit users. So that hits our system like a population increase of about 28,000 people in a community of 75,000, right? So that's a tremendous leap, and we need to be ready for it. We're actually working with those student communities as we speak to try and make sure it's a good landing and to reduce friction in the system for those students.
Great. Well, thank you very much. We have time actually for one more question. So this is from Amy Andrews. Many need more access out to North Shore to Balfour and Caslow, and it's an impossible trip. How can that be rectified? And are you looking to buy electric buses? So 2 questions there. One is about the service out to Balfour and Caslow, and one about electrifying buses.
Improving the service to Balfour is a critical priority. It was identified. We have proposed investments in it. We'll see if the provincial government will match our investments. I anticipate they will. Really, the vision is to go from Balfour to Trail, right? Extend that service level all the way out there over time. So we really want to see that happen. And I know the demand. I hear from those riders consistently. Electric buses. Everybody loves electric buses. I got to ride on an electric bus in Victoria for the first time last month. It was very exciting. They are currently being beta tested at a variety of locations in the province. Electric buses represent some unique challenges when you have to run heaters in them and when you're running them in snow over big hills and stuff like that, like we have here in Nelson. But they are coming. I do anticipate it's going to take a couple years. But in the meantime, I can assure you, I think BC Transit has given themselves, it's 8 years to a decade before this fleet is going to be flipped all the way over. So it's a very tight timeline. It's very aggressive, but we are talking about it now. Like we have to start doing our infrastructure planning now for things that are going to happen 5 years out.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Tom. That was very helpful. Great to understand that big picture and the process that we're involved in planning for that transition. Wonderful. So we're going to switch it over now to Sherry and to Alex to talk about the other components of our transportation response. And I'll pass it over to Sherry first. Over to you.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here. I'm Sherry. I'm a senior energy specialist, and I'm just going to share my screen here. Okay, here we go.
Yep, that's working.
Great. So Alex and I are going to give you a presentation on our regional active and low carbon transportation. Alex, can you just introduce yourself for a second there?
Hello, I'm Alex Lefloir, and I work as the Climate Action Assistant with RDCK.
Great, thank you. And I believe that Paris will also be popping in for a minute to talk on a topic as well. So just an outline, we will be talking about why transportation, why this is a large issue in our regional districts. Then going on to explaining about the 3 E's for reducing emissions. Alex will also be talking about the multimodal transportation networks idea, what the first steps and initiatives are. And then I'll be talking about other community initiatives that we have within this realm, the EV charging strategy for the regional district, and then finally our corporate fleet strategy. Alex, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Sherry. So, yeah, why is transportation such a big issue for the RDCK? And I think that this is true because approximately 70% of the community emissions in the region are from transportation, which is a higher portion than you would find in a city center, largely due to the distance between amenities and communities. And I was just looking this morning at Stats Canada, and yeah, another issue with transportation is that the average household in Canada, I couldn't find regional statistics, but in Canada is spending 20% of their expenditures on transportation, which is a lot of money. And I think that this would likely be higher for households in the region. So if we jump to the next slide, thanks. So when thinking about reducing emissions and energy, we've come up with this idea of the 3 E's, kind of like the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle of waste management. With energy, we can kind of think about it the same way, and by no means are these siloed, they're kind of overlapping. So the first is to eliminate emissions. So avoiding trips, walking, biking, improving access to different amenities, working from home. There's a number of ways that we can actually just avoid the emissions in the first place. The second would be to utilize efficient systems. So that could look like carpooling, public transit, as Tom just described, or fuel efficient vehicles. And the third would be electrification, just because it starts with an E, but that generally describes fuel switching to avoid the emissions tied to fossil fuels. And this could look like hybrid vehicles, electric vehicles, e-bikes, or potentially the use of alternate fuels. Some that have been proposed are hydrogen, biodiesel, and RNG. And I think that any alternate fuel, including electricity, would need to be studied and researched to make sure that it's a feasible option. If we just jump to the next slide, Sherry. Thanks. So when we think about the region as a whole and how transportation is going to look, we can refer to it as a transportation ecosystem or a multimodal transportation network. And this means that there's going to be a number of different solutions and modes of transportation. And for each community and each resident, that's going to look different. Someone in Edgewood versus someone in the city center of Nelson versus someone in Winlaw is going to have different opportunities and limitations. And that's why when we're thinking about regional solutions, we're not trying to propose one solution or one technology to support this shift.
Alex, sorry to interrupt. I just got a message from Susan that the slides aren't moving. Can anyone else? We're looking at a rural transportation slide now. It's got an infographic on it. Is anyone else not seeing that slide? Susan, it sounds like it might be something just on your end. Amy's got it on hers. So yeah, it's moving from my slides. Maybe a restart or rejoining. Sorry about that. And if anything else comes up, please let us know in the chat. Thanks very much. Sorry to interrupt, Alex.
And you can always find those slides in the recording afterwards.
Great.
And we can move to the next slide, Shay. Thanks. And beyond that. This just shows the different parts that are feeding into the transportation network. So when we think about a multimodal transportation network, yeah, we've been starting to explore what the regional district's role in this would look like. And part of that has been through discussions with regional partners and public engagement. And we really encourage residents to be involved in this process, as it won't be. It's nothing that we're going to do now. It's going to be over the next long period of time. So we've been thinking about developing a service or a strategy to guide active and low carbon transportation initiatives. And part of, well, I'll hold on with that part, but yeah, we're trying to find out what is our role, where can we advocate, what can we influence, and what can we not, and what should we, where are the other partners that we can be looking for to help us advance these solutions. And if we jump to the next slide. Sure, thanks. So last summer, we hosted a transportation think tank where we invited a number of regional partners. This included municipal representatives, local businesses, nonprofit organizations. And I think we had about 15 attendees at the first think tank. And we just wanted to brainstorm what the potential solutions could look like around the region. And it was really a really positive turnout, and we got a lot of feedback, and we're really excited to host a second think tank later this summer, where we invite back some of those partners, as well as look for new potential collaborators to join us in the think tank and see how we can take some of those ideas to the next level. Another way that we're researching some of these opportunities is through a partnership with WildSite, which is a local nonprofit, and they have a community ambassador program that started this summer, and they hired 4 youth to take 4 issues in the region and kind of start to explore those issues, and one of those was low carbon transportation. So right now, one of the youth is looking at potential solutions involving the public and engagement. They've attended a few different markets, one in Balfour recently, some in Nelson. And yeah, they're just looking for innovative ideas, interested parties to get involved in this transition. And then I'll turn it over to Paris for a minute to talk about how we've engaged in the Creston Multimodal Transportation Plan, as well as some of the first pilot projects that we're looking at.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, so as part of this investigation, because we understand that whatever comes about for the RDCK is going to be hyper-specific to our neighborhoods, to our communities, and that's part of our role as a local government, is to support those very rurally applicable solutions. So what makes sense in Vancouver, what makes sense in Victoria may make sense here, but we would like to test it and understand from residents what they think would work well for here. And that we're not seeking one particular solution, we're seeking a diversity of solutions and really making up that transportation ecosystem that will be different for each community. So some of the ways that we're doing it is we're hosting generalized think tanks where we invite in people who are experts in this area to understand. And then other ways that we're doing it is talking to residents and communities. And we had a great conversation with folks in the Creston Valley to understand how to support increased walkability, increased visibility, increased safety on the routes that they take. And we did some community mapping. And then we're also chatting with folks in the Slocan Valley about looking if there might be a solution around creating some security, some spots where bikes can be secured, locked up in a secure way. So that might look like a bike lockup, so that they can take their bike to the bus station and then get on the bus and then go to town, whether that's Nelson or Castlegar, and then come back and know that their bike will be there. Those are the kinds of ideas that we're interested in understanding, like what makes sense, what could be possible, what are the ideas that you're exploring in your community. And it's not for us to take it on, it's just for us to facilitate it and see where what the next step is. The other point is the Creston Multimodal Plan, which is an amazing document if you're interested just in learning about active and low carbon transportation. It's available on Engage or Let's Talk Creston, and they are looking at starting to implement it, and it just provides a great background document for learning what we can do in other areas as well. Over to you, Alex.
Yeah, I think at this point, Sherry's going to jump in onto her slides.
Great. Thank you, Alex and Paris. I'm just going to spend the next 4 to 5 minutes here talking about other initiatives that we have going on in the community adjacent to the strategies that Alex and Paris were talking about, and then a little bit about our corporate initiatives. So the community initiatives would include supporting the Provincial Clean Transportation Action Plan. This is a provincially led plan that we are involved with in the realm of advocating for our residents. So we provide input to different drafts or subject areas within this plan. The Clean Transportation Action Plan will be looking at, for example, reducing vehicle kilometers traveled. So these would be the targets within this plan: reducing vehicle kilometers traveled, shifting to more efficient modes of transport, increasing vehicle efficiency, and transitioning the supply market to cleaner fuels and zero emission vehicles. So very similar to what we were talking about in the beginning with the 3 E's that's guiding our strategy as well. Also, in the future, we hope to provide support to community, commercial, and industrial fleet managers. This will likely follow our own strategy that we will have for our own fleet, which I'll talk about in a couple of slides here. In the future, we do hope to provide some strategies and possibly a best practices guide that we can share with other fleet managers in the area. We also provide communications on rebate programs. There are, from time to time, provincial rebate programs available. Right now, you may know of one provincial rebate program for e-bikes. I've heard that the first iteration is quite oversubscribed at the moment, but we do try to keep aware of these rebate programs, so then we can then communicate them to the residents, so you can take a part of them. That would be through our website, through social media as our general modes of communication. Also, it would be through programs like the Community Ambassador Program when they're out at different events and festivals within your communities, within the whole RDCK community. Another thing we're looking at is the Kootenay Lake Ferry electrification. We hear at this point the plans for electrification are for 2030. The holdup apparently is the charger infrastructure and possibly some other issues with other examples of electrification that they're doing within the province and across North America. So we're just, again, keeping aware of the situation and providing support where we can. Finally, we are providing support on expanding the electric vehicle charging network within the RDCK. Oh, sorry. Got 2 screens here that I'm juggling. So within this, oh, I'm back. Not too far. Here's our EV charging network slide. So right now, there was an inventory of a suitable public spaces chargers that was done by a nonprofit organization, the Community Energy Association, a few years ago. They did pinpoint that the East Shore is a corridor that does not have many chargers at the moment, and then also north of Caslow. This in conjunction with the thought that overall, we do not have enough EV chargers in the regional district in order to support the current EVs and future EVs in the area. So to that point, there are many programs that are available trying to increase the amount of chargers that are available. Some of the programs that are available now in the funding realm would be the zero emission vehicle infrastructure program or Accelerate, which is administered by Accelerate Kootenays. And this is a program that pays for 50% of a public charger. Most of them at the level 2 charge, so these are not necessarily the fast chargers that are being installed with this program, but more the lower transmission levels, or ones that you would have to spend a couple hours at a place in order to take advantage of these. There's other funding programs that are available. Columbia Basin Trust has programs from time to time. Another program that's happening right now is Kootenay Rocky Tourism, and they are providing quite a bit of funding for the placement of chargers. So the RDCK's role here is just to support both nonprofit community partners, businesses, local governments, municipal partners, in order to try to increase the amount of chargers in this area. Another area that we look at is the promotion of technologies for residences and commercial buildings. So this would be as supporting with EV readiness for residents, commercial, and this would be in the form of guidelines and possible incentive top-ups that are incentives right now are available at the provincial level. So it would be exploring a top-up to this just to promote more EV readiness at that level, at the residence level. Finally, sorry, it's 11:25. I do want to leave questions leave time for questions. So quickly, I'll just go over our fleet strategy. As Tom said before, we have over 150 vehicles in the RDCK fleet. These would be passenger service trucks, there's waste transportation trucks, we have front-end loaders, we have Zambonis serving the arenas sector, etc. The majority of our passenger vehicles at the moment are hybrids. So that would be both gas and electricity. We do have a pilot project happening this year, which is fully funded by the Columbia Basin Trust. That would be an electric passenger vehicle and a workplace EV charger that will be placed at our Lakeside office. Our plans for the future would include a fleet strategy. So this would have several components. We would want to optimize our fleet. So look at the number of vehicles, the allocation. Are we fully utilizing what we have available to us? Can we decrease any of our fleet or share between services or something like that? Trip optimization. This primarily would look at the waste and recycling transport, using GPS to track the routes to see what their patterns are, and then looking at a consultant to help us to optimize this. We'd be also looking at things like trip avoidance. Already the staff quite a bit work hybrid, so there's less travel to and from work. And we have lots of meetings online at this moment, just like this one. But further taking a look at how we could avoid trips in the future. And then finally, looking to transition to low carbon transportation. And that is the conclusion of what I have to say for this presentation. So thank you very much for your attention, and wondering if you have any questions at this time.
Thank you so much, Sherry. This is fantastic. And thank you very much, Alex, as well. Thank you for filling out the picture around the vision for a rural transportation ecosystem with the backbone of regional transit. We have a few questions and just a few moments before our 11:30. One question is, can you provide a little bit of information about how the funding or how we are funding the chargers? So those public chargers that are going out in community, what's the partnership around that model?
For the chargers right now, the charging funding through Accelerate Kootenays through the ZBIT program would be 50% to the funder, and then the remainder is paid by the business or the entity that is hosting the charger. So the RDCK has no financial input into those charging situations.
Great, thank you so much. And then we have several other questions. I'm wondering if there's from folks that we have heard up from already and that we're responding to in the question and answer. I wonder if there's anyone else on the call that has a question that we haven't heard from yet today. Great. Well, I'll let the speakers just provide a conclusion if you want to provide any final thoughts, and then we'll close out for today. Sherry, Alex, and if Tom is still on the line, any final thoughts? I'll just say thank you very much. Oh, Tracy Fellows. Yes, we haven't heard from you today, Tracy. Would you like to ask a question? Could you put it in the Q&A, please? Or in the chat if that's more accessible to you.
And just while we're waiting for that question, I'd like to just echo the message that, yeah, the transportation shift is a huge challenge that we're facing, and it's going to take coordinated and collaborative effort. And yeah, we're really excited to engage with residents and find solutions that make sense and that are accessible to all.
Wonderful. Tracy, if you want to follow up by, oh, there he is. Please comment on the statement that residents will not be allowed personal vehicles. My view is the plan to incentivize, not take away. That is very correct. Thank you very much for that clarification, Tracy. We really appreciate the opportunity to speak to this. This has been a message that's been circulating in the public and is not true. People have autonomy over whether or not they choose to buy a vehicle or whether or not which vehicle they choose to buy. There is a program that the province is rolling out where 90% of new vehicles by 2030 will be zero emission vehicles, so no longer gas fueled vehicles. But that means that no one is required to buy a zero emission vehicle. Everybody has the ability to choose which vehicle that they want, and there will still be lots of gas powered vehicles on the road that will be available. But yes, 90% of personal use vehicles will be transitioning to electric use vehicles or zero emission vehicles, which might include new technology in addition to electric by 2030, and that's a provincial program. Tom or Sherry or Alex, do you have any further comments on that?
Just to say that the province is working with the supply market in that case. So it is expected that costs will come down, subsidies will be provided. It'll be more efficient, less time to actually get your EV and et cetera, et cetera. So just to say that the province is working in many different ways to support this.
And part of our role as RDCK, because we realize that this is a big shift. I mean, I think everyone on this panel can appreciate that, yeah, that transitioning to something that is a new technology and that at this time is really expensive and so we're really trying to understand how that works for our regional district. And so that's part of our role as a local government, is to make sure that we are ready and to advocate for the province to say, well, we need a bit more time, or this is what it needs to look like, or we need to protect our lifestyle in this way. So we're trying to really ensure that our messages are heard by the province, and that the experience that people have been reflecting in today's conversation about us being a diverse, expanded, sparsely populated region is something that is reflected in provincial decision making. Thank you very much, everybody. And again, this recording will be posted online, and we look forward to seeing you next Monday for our next webinar. All the best. Bye.